Hello, Year 7. Welcome to our lesson today. Why did Martin Luther criticize the Catholic Church? Before we begin, just take a minute to make sure that the area you're working in is clear, tidy, and free of distractions. If you have a phone with you, turn it off and preferably put it in another room. Throughout this lesson, I'll be asking you to complete a number of tasks. When it's time to do a task, I'll instruct you to pause the video and then to restart it when that task is done. If you get stuck at any point, you could always go back to another part of the video. So let's begin with our first task. On your exercise book or the piece of paper on which you're working, I would like you to write the date and then the title written in the blue box in the middle of your screen. Pause the video, and when you finish that, restart. Welcome. We're going to begin with a starter quiz today. There are 3 questions on the left-hand side of your screen. I would like you to answer each one. You do not need to answer in a full sentence. Just 1 or 2 words is fine. These questions are all based on work that you did before schools shut down. Pause the video now. Welcome back. If you got it correct, give yourself a tick. If you got it wrong, well then cross out your incorrect answer and write the correct one next to it. And if you didn't write anything at all, just write the correct answer in the blank space that you left. When you've done that, restart the video. Okay, welcome back. The Catholic Church in the 16th century. To get us thinking about this, I would like you to answer 2 of the 4 questions in the yellow box on your paper or in your exercise book. Write a full sentence this time. Choose the 2 that you want to. You don't need to do all 4. Pause the video now, and when you've answered 2 questions, restart. Welcome back. I wonder what you got. I imagine for question 1, some of you will have written a hospital or the doctors, or some of you might have written your mum or dad. For question 2, you've probably put a friend's house if you know someone who lives in the place you're travelling to, or you might have written a hotel or a hostel. For number 3, well, I imagine you'll have a wide range of answers for this. You might have someone in your family. You could also have a teacher, or you might have counselling services that help you when you need them. And for question 4, I hope that all of you have written school. It's such a shame we can't be together now, but in normal times, as you know, this is the place where you should learn the most. But what about the 16th century? Well, in the 16th century, often written down as the 1500s, most people went to their local church for all of those needs. If they were ill, they would ask the priest to pray for them. They wouldn't generally ask for the priest to make them better, but they would pray for the forgiveness of their sins, either so that God would then take away the punishment of the illness, or so if they died, they could be confident of going to heaven. If they were travelling to another area, they would often ask to stay at the church. Hotels and hostels were not common during the 16th century. If they were sad or anxious, they would ask the priest for prayer and emotional support. It's important to remember that sickness, death, misery and pain were all much more common in the 1500s than they were now. Death rates were higher, so that meant people were very much more aware of death than perhaps some of us are today, and they would often need someone to go to talk through their concerns and their worries, or the concerns or worries they had for other people. Schools, well, definitely for the poor, were also very uncommon. And the place where people would receive most teaching would be in the church, and this would usually be about the Bible or how to behave well. From all of this, you should have grasped that the Catholic Church was extremely important to people. It was the centre of their lives, and it also taught them how to get to heaven and how to stay out of hell when they died. You will have noticed, those of you who studied hard during the first part of the medieval curriculum earlier in the year, that this is quite similar to the way in which medieval people viewed their church too. So what did the Catholic Church actually teach? What was happening in the churches? What were the priests telling people? Well, a lot of things, and we can't possibly go through all of those things in this lesson. We can go through 4 things which are particularly important. The Catholic Church taught people that they could not pray directly to God. They believed the priest had to act as a sort of go-between. They would deliver their prayers to the priest, and then the priest would deliver up those prayers to God for them. Prayer was especially important because this was how sins were forgiven. You had to ask, and that meant you needed your priest to pass on these prayers where you were saying sorry for what you'd done, because if you weren't forgiven, well, then you would go to hell when you died. The Catholic Church also taught that church services should be in Latin. And yes, this means that many people attending those services wouldn't actually have known what the priest was talking about, would have had to rely on what he told them later. They also believed that church buildings should be richly decorated to reflect the glory of God. They would have believed that a simple or a run-down church was an insult to God because the best of everything should go to him. So that meant that churches were supposed to be beautifully decorated with wonderful stained glass windows and gold candlesticks and anything that made the place look beautiful. And finally, the Catholic Church also taught that giving money or gifts to the church led to the forgiveness of sins. So often after people died, they would leave money or gifts to their priests or to the church. And these were called indulgences. Now, this meant they would spend less time in what was known as purgatory. As well as heaven and hell, the Catholics at this time believed there was a place between the two. It was a place of punishment. So people believed they would be tortured there, often in fire, but it was temporary. And the torture would burn away your sins so that you were good enough to go to heaven once you had been punished. This people believe could last hundreds or even thousands of years, and so people were anxious to give money or gift to the church so that they would have to spend less time there before they were able to go to heaven, which they regarded as paradise. Okay, let's move to your 5th task. What I would like you to do now is summarize the key teachings of the Catholic Church in a spider diagram. Try and do this from the memory of what I said and what was on the slide. Only use the information on the previous slide to check at the end. Pause the video and create your spider diagram now. Welcome back. Now you've completed your spider diagram, do feel free to flick back to the previous slide to see if you can see if there was anything that you missed. Once you've done that, restart the video. Right, let's move on to our 6th task, and this is one where you don't need to write anything, you just need to think. Why wouldn't people question any of these teachings? Why did nobody ask? Why can't the service be in English? Why did nobody ask? Why do we have to give our prayers to the priest? Why can't we pray ourselves? Why did nobody ask how it was fair that richer people would be able to buy their way out of purgatory faster than poorer people who couldn't pay for the indulgences the very rich could? Pause the video. Just have a think. Why didn't people question? Welcome back. People did not question the teachings of the church because questioning the church's teachings was seen as a sin. And this meant you would go to hell. People also did not question these teachings because they just didn't know enough to. Most people could not read or write, and so they trusted their priests to be telling the truth about what the Bible said, even if they did not fully understand it. What was important was not to work things out for yourself, but to trust that what you were told by your priest was the truth. And anybody so much as doubting that or questioning that would have been seen as questioning God. And of course, questioning God was a sin and could result in you either spending more time in purgatory or even going to hell. One man did begin to question, Martin Luther. There's a picture of him here on the right. Martin Luther wasn't English. He was a priest in an area which is now part of Germany. It wasn't called Germany at the time, but the area he lived in, well, that's part of Germany now. Martin Luther was unusual. He studied the Bible and the teachings of early Christians, and he came to believe that the Catholic Church was wrong, that it had made quite a few mistakes, and that some of the teachings we went through earlier in this lesson were not correct. He believed, from his reading of the Bible, that only God could forgive sins. Priests could not forgive sins for you. And people didn't need priests to pray for them at all. They could directly ask God for forgiveness. He also believed that church buildings should be simple, so as not to distract people from God. Luther would have said that yes, while the beautiful stained glass windows and statues and gold everywhere was very beautiful, this distracted people from paying attention to what the priest was saying. And Luther also said that it was a duty of the church to help the poor. So any money that was being spent on beautifying the building was wasted money, because that should be used to help those in poverty. He also believed that teaching in the Bible should be in a language that everyone understood. He believed the whole purpose of the Bible was that it was for everyone, not for priests to read and then pass on what they took from it, but that they should be able to read it in their own language and learn for themselves. And he also, as hard as he tried, could not find anything in the Bible that said anything about people buying their way out of purgatory early or avoiding hell through giving gifts or presents to the church. His reading of the Bible said that, well, God sent everybody to heaven if they were genuinely sorry for what they'd done and they prayed themselves. There were other criticisms, but these, for now, are the four most. Well, what happened next? Martin Luther had lots of other complaints. He wrote all these down on a document called the 95 Theses and nailed them to a cathedral door. Believe it or not, at the time, he wasn't trying to cause lots and lots of trouble. The language of his document was very respectful and academic. He was trying to convince the Catholic Church to change. His ideas caught on. Lots of other people read them. Oh, he wanted them to, which is why he nailed them to the cathedral door. He did that deliberately, so they were in a public place. And once people got hold of his theses, they started printing them using the newly developed printing presses that had recently developed in Europe. Lots of people agreed with his reading of the Bible. He wrote other documents explaining his ideas too, and the Catholic Church became very, very concerned because this was a direct criticism of their way of doing things. It's probably fair to say that the Catholic Church also worried that if people believed Luther, well, they would start following his ideas, which in their view would be committing a sin, which would result in them spending more time in purgatory or perhaps even going to hell. In order to try and put a stop to this, in 1521, the Pope excommunicated Martin Luther. This means being officially expelled from the Catholic Church. It meant that the Pope, the most important Catholic in the world, was saying that Martin Luther was no longer a Christian. And this meant that the Catholic Church said he would go to hell when he died. They hoped by doing this They would put off others from following Martin Luther's. Let's move on to task 7 now. What were Martin Luther's criticisms of the Catholic Church? You're going to write this in a full paragraph. You may use these sentence starters in the yellow box to help you if you should so wish. As before, I would encourage you to try and do these sentence starters without going back in the video to find the answers. Pause the video, and when you've done as much as you can, restart it. Well, welcome back. Check your answers with what I'm going to say now. You should have something along the lines of Martin Luther believed only God could forgive sins. He believed church buildings should be simple so the people in them could better concentrate on what the priest was saying. He thought teaching should be in a language that people understood so they would know themselves what the Bible said. And he said people could not buy their way out of hell by purchasing indulgences. If you got any of those answers wrong or you left a blank, fill in the correct answer now and then restart your video when you're ready. Welcome back. Let's move away from the area we now call Germany, in which Martin Luther was living, and zoom in on England. At the time we're interested in, King Henry VIII is the monarch. In England, King Henry VIII was, to begin with, very against Martin Luther's ideas. He was a supporter of the Catholic Church, and he wrote a pamphlet. A pamphlet is a sort of leaflet or short book defending the Catholic Church against Luther's criticisms. His work said the Pope was right and Martin Luther was wrong. The Pope was so pleased, he gave Henry a special title, Defender of the Faith. At this time, King Henry VIII and the Pope were very, very close. As time went on, Henry VIII experienced a succession of problems. We're going to be looking at more of those in our next lesson. His first problem was that Henry decided he wanted to end his marriage to his wife, Queen Catherine. This was because although she had had children, she had had no son to be king after him, and she was now getting too old to have any more children. He was also falling in love with another woman called Anne Boleyn. King Henry VIII required permission from the Pope to end his marriage with Catherine, so he could marry Anne Boleyn, the woman he'd now decided he loved, and so he could try and have more children, more specifically, a strong son to be king after him. But the Pope refused to give that permission. This is going to become very important when in our next lessons we look at Henry VIII's decision to break from the Catholic Church. Go back through the PowerPoint, back through the video if you need to, and fill in any gaps or correct any mistakes that you made. That concludes our lesson today, Year 7. Well done. I would now suggest that you take a photo of your work, and if you can, email it through to your school so you can get feedback. Thank you very much for working so hard, and I look forward to teaching you again.